All right. Okay, as I prepare myself, I want to welcome you to the 30-second Path Esoteric Study and Review. I am the presentator, the presenter of some information that we can all ingest to help expand our thinking in the abstract path, in the abstract consciousness of understanding life, existence, persons, places, things, time, space. So that was my purpose for creating this channel, to have a space to present information from an abstract point of view so everyone could, in their time of analyzing and thinking and contemplating, you can kind of contemplate things from a different perspective. So I welcome you. I'm thankful, I'm grateful for you joining me today and in the future, uh, here on the 30-second path. Okay. So today, I'm gonna go into a little bit of something here. Self-awareness. We've all heard this term. We've all have even sought to discover self-awareness. But what is this self that we're seeking to become aware of? Does it have a particular look? Does it have a particular sound? What do we really know? So this is what led me on a self-study in my own journey towards self-awareness, self-realization, and through self-contemplation and self-meditation. Uh, it just led me to get to a more subtle understanding, not such a concrete understanding that will be set in stone. It's not going to be. See, the understanding of these esoteric or arcane or deeper meanings to things is that the definitions are very, they're flexible. They're able not to bend it in a way that's towards something that's just so fantastic that it's unbelievable, but it's flexible to the point where you can expand your understanding to overstand the understanding. So we're going to attempt, as I have written here, getting to know the Antayaman, the supreme indweller. Antayaman is a Sanskrit word which means the inner knower, the inner observer. Also, which can be spelled without the N, Antayami, the supreme indweller. So in this search for self-awareness, where I will attempt with sincerity to open up a door to an understanding of what's called the supreme indweller. So, as I said, the self, we hear self, and we often hear these terms: know thyself, knowledge of self, and self-awareness. And when we ask, but what is this knowledge of self? How do you know thyself? We, like I said, these definitions, they get very, very vast. No one can truly give a definition that's going to satisfy this inner seeking. Because as this definition says, as this word, a part of this word is the indweller. So the things of the self that we're seeking must be what? Internal, an internal self-awareness, an internal knowledge of self, internally knowing thyself. So what we're hearing is not the truth of the definition. It's just a form of the definition, hearing it through uh, the auditory processes to be logically defined by the mind. So, in order to understand the self, we must investigate its structure of operation. And as we undertake this journey into the investigation in the structure and operation of self, we'll begin to discover multiple components that make up a whole being that is so very complex and mind blowing. It's astonishing. It's amazing when you begin to understand the supremeness operating uh, this vehicle called the body, the you, the me, the multiple names that we give this thing. So, in this presentation, I will do uh, present a presentation of multiple examples or definitions of what we're considering and calling the self. So to begin, of course, let's go through some definitions here. So at the top, you see we have self. And this is coming from the old English word. Of course, there's three different self, which we see the definition one's own person. So this is where we've come to knowing that this is me. I am this, and this is I, and this is how I do things. That's one's own person. That's the definition. And as we go through this, the reasoning, the one of the main reasons for having the 30-second path, as I presented, it's to, like I said, for your mind to think more deeply than what is being presented and what has been presented to us as definitions of who we are and how things operate. To develop into the magical personality that we truly are and the higher self, we must understand these terms. So this is what this is: the presentation, and I'm not gonna be extensive. I'm gonna try to present it in a decent time, get in, get out, you know. So this here, as we see, this own person is the self, and as a pronoun, from we get this from Old English that has now become a part of our vernacular. So from the point of psychology, in psychology, the notion of self refers to a person's experience as a single, unitary, autonomous being that is separate from others, experienced with continuity through time and space. The experience of the self includes consciousness of one's physicality as well as one's inner character and emotional life. That right there is a perfect westernized definition of a person, not the trueness of self. And don't forget, that's what this is. This is going to get into the trueness of self. So in psychology, a westernized process of denoting and breaking down the human being as they operate within society, not from the spiritual perspective. So they're saying being separate from others. That right there is the individualization, individuation. I'll touch on that just briefly, just in a moment. So let's go further. Person. Origin and meaning of person, circa 1200. So this word only came about in the year 1200. Person, an individual, a human being, from the old French personne, or however they pronounce it in French. Human being, anyone, person, modern French, person. You see, it's this multiple, even in their study of these words and trying to define it, it's just the same thing, just filtered through their point of view. And directly from Latin, persona, human being, person, personage. Here's where it gets important. A part in a drama, assumed character, originally a mask, a false face, such as those of wood or clay covering the whole head, worn by the actors in late and latter Roman theater. OED offers the general explanation of persona as related to Latin personare, to sound through, the mark as something spoken through and perhaps amplifying the voice. But the long, see, that's an error. But the long of makes a difficulty. And it goes into these doctors. Klein and Bart say it is possibly borrowed from the Etruscan fursu mask. So this is talking about a mask. What did Future say? Mask off, mask on. This is what we wear every day. This is the person that we put on in society. This is what we have become. We have all become a persona. We've become a mask, a false face of the true and original self operating through this human character. Because you see, to sound through, as it said right here, explanation of persona as related to Latin personare, to sound through. So the sound that's coming through our mouth, from our tongue, vibrating our vocal cords that we hear with our ears. This is why everything is so confusing. See, this is how everything becomes torn apart, mixed up, and we have to go into this type of particular study of self so we can understand and become, not just understand, become the truth, not just a persona. This is the reason why we're trying to detach from certain things and elevate. Hence the 30-second path. You want to walk on this path. You want to go from matter to non-matter. You're trying to get back to that person, that self. You don't want to be an instrument for sound to come through, a puppet, an actor. This is why you can't believe things you see on TV, because the television is a tool for sound to come through. And what is this vibratory frequency doing once we hear it? It's making us become what we see. It's making us into the person it wants us to be. So we don't even be a human being. We are a human being. We are a human being what someone else wants us to be. We are a persona, personage, a part in a drama, an assumed character in a play, and the narrative and words are written by someone else. We define ourselves by what everyone else has told us. Our mothers, our fathers, our doctors, our teachers, our aunties, our uncles, our pastors, our rabbis. We've become something else that we didn't even, never given an opportunity to become our true self, okay? So right here, I go straight into a whole nother. This is the Eastern. Let's go to the, no, I'm sorry, forgive me. This is the Western thinking. Here's the Eastern thinking. This comes from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. I'll make a video about that in a future time to go over it a little bit more because it's a beautifully written, it's not just a book, it's spiritual writing. So we'll go into that another time. But as I have on the top, Chitta Vritti Nirodha. This here means the skill of yoga is demonstrated by the conscious non-operation of the vibrational modes of the mental emotional energy. Then the perceiver is situated in his own form. So I put this here so we can get, as I said earlier, a more broader, a more subtle, a more thinner, a purer understanding that in order to demonstrate who you truly are, you must become an individual who is in control, as it says, in control of the vibrational modes of the mental emotional energy. Mental emotional energy, as Chitta is the mind, right? I've written here, victory refers to thoughts. Naroda means removal. So in order for you to become who you are or situated in your own form, you must remove the thoughts that are swirling within your mind. And these thoughts are planted in your mind, as I stated earlier, from these definitions, which have defined us for years, referring to the person's experience as a single, unitary, autonomous being that is separate from others. We know we're not separate from others. The only thing that separates from others is the thoughts that we have that separates us. Higher consciousness and higher thinking knows that all is everything and everything is all. All is the mind. So the vibrational modes of the mental emotional energy creates an illusion. So you can only demonstrate the unity of self when you're in control of that. And that's what yoga is. Yoga is derived from a Sanskrit word yuj, meaning to yoke or to unite. So if you're not unified within your being, you're not living out the trueness of yourself. You're not demonstrating your own form. It says the perceiver is situated in his own form. The perceiver, the observer, the one who's perceiving, who sees life, who's consciously aware of each and every action that's being demonstrated in and around you. So I put this picture: as a still pond reflects the light of the moon, so a still mind reflects the radiance of our true nature. We've not been living the true nature of ourselves. So to obtain this knowledge of self, we must begin a process of controlling the energetic movements of mind that makes it not still. So there's a process in the development of knowing thyself, of gaining knowledge of self. There's a process to get there. It just doesn't happen. You have to work towards it. The skill of yoga, it takes skill. It takes practice by the conscious non-operation. You're conscious of what you're thinking. You're conscious of what you're taking into you that only seeks to do what? create more definitions to turn you into what? A persona. So you can put on your mask and walk out the door and feel good about yourself, this person you've become. The perceiver, when situated in his own form, stands firm on square. Nothing can shake this individual. Nothing can uproot a tree that's firmly planted. So once you become firmly planted in the self, the trueness of self, perceiving life as it unfolds around you, that is the strength and power that's generated within you, that's going to be demonstrated and make you become a living God. So let's hear what Carl Jung has to say. Dr. Jung. And I don't and in a lot of things when I present, I won't go, especially in this here presentation. I'm not gonna go too much. I just put here we all should know who Carl Jung is, because I believe I'm speaking to intelligent individuals on the path. Seeker. I'm only speaking to seekers, those who are seeking trueness. So Carl Jung says the self is an archetype that represents the unified unconsciousness and consciousness of an individual. So we all know that Carl Jung was a studier of Eastern philosophy, Eastern Vedic science, which we call we well, that's the name. I'm going to leave it at that, Vedic science. Studying the ancient books of the Bhagavad Gita's, the Vedas, the Shastras, studying ancient texts from the East, giving him a broader understanding of the psychology of man, the psyche of man and woman. The self is an archetype that represents the unified unconsciousness and consciousness of an individual. Creating the self occurs through a process known as individuation, in which the various aspects of personality are integrated. This is a slightly higher understanding of what I read earlier, because this is a person who's conscious, who's interacting, who understands that the self is an archetype. It's a you can you can demonstrate the pattern of an archetype. You could demonstrate the patterns and activity of a particular self, because it's developed through a process, as he says, of known as individuation, becoming an individual, standing on what you hold to be your own moral and ethical and conscious truth. Now, whether you're standing on right facts or incorrect facts, that's also a part of the individuation, in which the various aspects of personality are integrated. So with these various aspects, you become multiple persons. So as we grow into the demonstration of of magical personality, living the magical lifestyle, and utilizing these processes for ritual and so on and so forth, this is where now you can take on the energies, as we call them. We can take on the personas of the deity, and not just give our power to something we're not understanding. So when we harmonize the flow of prana / spiritual energy in the body, we gain control of the process to disassociate the intellect and ego from consciousness. We gain control of the process to disassociate the intellect and the ego from consciousness. Consciousness meaning interacting with life and the activities that we are experiencing. You can disassociate the process of when you take these things in. If you become attached to it, you like it or you dislike it, which triggers intellect and ego to go into action. That's a whole nother conversation right there to build off of that, just the ego and the intellect and consciousness. So a harmonious integration and understanding of what we're calling the self is what's needed for the totality of the being that we call us, me, I. Okay? So to go on further, ego is defined as one's image of oneself or the conscious mind, which is based on one's perception. It can also be defined as conceit, a sense of self-importance, or as self-esteem. So these are the archetypical concepts that develop into the various aspects of personality, because these are integrations that become attached to the individual. These are demonstrations. You demonstrate the incorrect activity of the ego by being conceited or having this bloated self-importance or being overly the self-esteem puffed up with pride. That's where these come from. They stem from an incorrect understanding of the self. So in the world of yoga, I should have said in the world of yogic science, ego in Sanskrit is called the ahamkara, is defined as the individual sense of who they are, their thoughts, desires, and personality as shaped by the mind. It is sometimes referred to as the false self because it is colored only by one's view of the world. Your attachments is shaped by your ego, your I-ness. The word ahamkara is your I-ness. It's an integral part of who we are as a human being. And I'm not saying that there is anything wrong or right, and it's just incorrect, and then there's correct understanding, incorrect and correct comprehension, incorrect and correct demonstrations. This, these are densified definitions coming from the higher planes to this lower plane to this sphere, which is called Malkuth, which we call Earth. This is where these definitions come from. So ahamkara is a Sanskrit word used in Hindu philosophy to refer to the human ego. It is derived from the root word aham, meaning self, and kara, meaning to do with or created thing. So the creation of you comes from your interactions with ego, which does what it want, what does what it does. These these parts of self are ancient concepts, and you can't change the truth of them. Ahamkara, the self-created I-ness, identifying with the physical person. That's where the ill-mannered behavior comes from, identifying with the wrong concepts of self, false self, because your personality and your thoughts are shaped by Maya, because Maya is colored, as I said, as says earlier, only by one's view of the world. So if you're viewing the world from a false perception of self, what are you demonstrating to other people? So in order to understand what is self, know thyself, you must unify the total structure of the organism. You are not the personality. Personalities or qualities that have become a part of our persona. Your identifying with these interactions of life and people has veiled your higher perception of the true self. Look what Swami Krishnananda says. We no longer interpret things in terms of objects and persons, and our evaluations of life no longer depend on persons and things. We learn to think in terms of the generals and the universals rather than the particulars and bodily existences. That's a mouthful right there. We learn to think in terms of the generals, meaning that the general truth, observing the demonstration of an individual based off of universal facts rather than particulars of the body. You know how they say don't judge a book by its cover? Well, you shouldn't be judging anything in the first place. You should be discerning whether it's demonstrated correctly or incorrectly. That's what he's saying in a nutshell. We no longer get swayed. We no longer let our mind become filled with terms based off of what we've been taught before or what we're learning or some emotional trigger. So we paint someone else with the colors of our mind in falsehood. So this was just a present. This is a presentation, like I said, to make you just give you something to ponder, something to think about. Go a little bit deeper when we get into this concepts of self. You're not trying to purify a false self and keep it the same. You're trying to unclothe yourself from the personality. You're trying to become one with the universal consciousness. Even Jung knew that. He didn't speak it from the terms of giving different Sanskrit words and stuff. And even in some of his writings, he does. But that's for you to study on your own. The westernized minds of doctors and the European scholars learned their information from Western esoteric and exoteric teachers and sages and yogins and they're not going to disclose that. They haven't disclosed it. It takes self-study and concentration to come to that understanding, to realize that the ancient knowledge of the East is what has shined the light on the West. The westernized mind, of course, developed into this higher thinking being, but it mixes falsehood with truth. It taints the purity of things. And it keeps us interpreting things in terms of objects and persons. This is why they develop shows like America's Next Top Model and what was the other one? They were performers. They were American Idol. That's why people want to become I want to become a superstar and and all of this and all of that. People get just, your mind is just always being bombarded with something to satisfy it and entertain it. So we lose track. Succumbing to an end of my presentation to wrap it up, because in the beginning, getting to know the Antayami, the supreme indweller, we now come to our title, the Supreme Personality. Antayami is a Sanskrit term that means inner witness, or the one who controls from within. You know how there was a saying that Christians would always, and I don't want to just say Christians, but it was a saying that goes around from the Bible: he who is in me is stronger than he who is without. What is inward is stronger than the outward in terms of what it's saying. The one who controls from within is your true self, the inner witness. See, I'm gonna scroll back. Let me see if I can remember. If I can remember where it was at. Based on one's perception. I didn't want to go all the way that back, but I just wanted to see that. Just look at that again. Then the perceiver is situated in his own form. So if we go from this and we get to what I stated here, or what is stated here in this definition of Antayami, the one who controls from within is where the one is situated in his own form. It can refer to the higher self or the power of God residing within the individual soul. The word is derived from the Sanskrit antar, meaning internal or within or inward, and ayami, meaning restrained. Antayami is also sometimes used to refer to God existing within all creation. This aspect of God is also called the super soul and the para atman, universal or eternal soul. This is the self. This is the self. This is the individuation that we're seeking. And this is not an individualized concept. The universal soul is not an individual. It's universal. It's eternal. Supersedes everything. It is within and inward and operating through all and all. And every person that we like and the people that we don't like, they're all a demonstration of a supreme personality. The only thing that they are demonstrating is correct behavior and incorrect demonstration of a behavior. And these are lessons to learn, because as we perceive, because we are the inner witness is looking outward from this physical form and seeing nothing but demonstrations. And these demonstrations that the human consciousness filters through the dense mind, these are things that become what we do becomes our karma. So this is the reason why we must take a moment and we must take time and sit back and truly analyze this. Do not research. Do your research. Study, learn, so you can grow into your higher self. It's not just saying that, I'm manifesting my higher self, I'm living my good. No, it's bigger than that. It's the non-conscious operation. You don't even have to say it once you're doing it. You know why? because it's universally seen by all those who are super souls, all those who are the para atman. That's your universal family. Those who have reached the realm beyond the body. That's the reason why I created, well, I didn't create it. See, that right there is even the language of the self. I created. The information that I bear witness to from the higher source led me to call it the 32nd path. Taking you to an astral realm, taking you to the realm of multiple demonstrations of spiritual understanding. Not just another place to fucking entertain you and keep you company for a little while. So take the time to understand the Antayami, your inner witness, your supreme personality. Take time to understand the aspect of God within you. Not the aspect of God that was given to you. Seeking it outside of yourself is not going to work. You have to begin to know who you are and what's operating through the person that we call the you. See, that's what made, and for those who watch Reverend Ike, that's what he was speaking. He just used the words that he used to demonstrate it so people can get an understanding. But he spoke, this is it. He understood the inward nature of himself. We have to understand what's operating within us, the eternal, the internal essence of us, our eternal soulness. The light coming from within. I'm thankful to have the opportunity to share a little bit of information. So, in closing, I give a quote from the Upanishads, the Brihadranyaka, which I've probably pronounced that not correctly. As there can be no water without the sea, no touch without the skin, no smell without the rose, no taste without the tongue, no form without the eye, no sound without the ear, no thought without the mind, no wisdom without the heart, no work without the hands, no walking without feet, no scriptures without the word. So there can be no nothing without the self. With that, I thank you. I'm grateful for those who take time out of their busy schedules to take a listen to me, Shango Watum, on the 32nd path. Because we all are traveling on a path that's leading us towards a higher understanding and a higher consciousness. So I'm just going to say thank you for that. Peace.